Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and last weekend I made several videos on OCaml, the OCaml programming language. And just a kind of, again, little history is that OCaml is a functional programming language. People who like it really like it, so I was doing some videos on that. Now, what they did is they created this transpiler called BuckleScript. And BuckleScript, what it does, it takes like OCaml type code and then compiles it to JavaScript. So what they did is they created a dialect of OCaml that was more like JavaScripty. So that way people who knew JavaScript could much easier sort of embrace this sort of way of programming. And this is called Reason. Okay, so Reason is the language. So it's a dialect of OCaml. Has all the same features. The syntax just slightly different. Certain patterns are just more like JavaScript. Some of the reserved words, the way they're used, are more like JavaScript to give it more of a JavaScript feel. Um, and that was cool. A lot of people like Reason. There's templates to do your React apps using Reason, etc. Okay, but what they've done recently, and Reason can be used more than just for doing JavaScript. You can actually natively compile Reason with Dune. Dune is the OCaml compiler using SC or Easy. We'll show you that in a second. But what they've recently done is in the newest version of BuckleScript, they've kind of focused, because before the BuckleScript compiler allowed you to do OCaml and Reason code, and it was just kind of, it wasn't really as focused. What they did is they rebranded it as a ReScript, meaning Reason script. So this is specifically taking Reason code and compiling it to JavaScript, okay? And basically there's some syntax changes, not much, but like some little things that make it a little bit more usable for JavaScript users. Again, they're targeting people who use JavaScript already, who are looking for an alternative. And basically, their big competition is TypeScript, because basically the big selling point of like something like Reason and TypeScript is introduction of like type checking. Okay, now OCaml and functional programming offers a bunch of other things, but the reason you'd want to shift from JavaScript to one of these languages is for typing, so that way larger code bases become more manageable. Okay, and TypeScript has like the support of Microsoft, and then again, instead of like adapting a different language, what they did is they just literally extended JavaScript, versus here in ReScript where they try to mold OCaml to be as a little of a leap from JavaScript as possible, but it's still sort of a different way of thinking. If you saw my OCaml videos, you saw OCaml is sort of a different way of approaching how you write your code. Okay, so what I want to do is just compare Reason, because you can still use Reason to compile native code using Dune. So you can essentially use it as an alternative to OCaml. And then there's ReScript, which is, again, so I just want to go through each one's documentation and just kind of, over the next few videos, compare the differences. So let's go to the docs. Let's go to the docs. Okay, and let's just show you the setup. So basically, when you read both of their docs, they make you clone a repo. Okay, and I'll show you both. So it's like this hello Reason repo for you to create a basic Reason project. And what you find in here, it's not the most straightforward thing I've ever seen, but basically you would open up this folder, and then you would install, first you have to install the SE package manager. So it's a special package manager specifically for like Reason. You install SE, and then you can use SE to run commands. Although in here they have a package.json with a lot of the SE commands already built in. So like this command will actually run the script. Well, actually this will compile and run it, so you literally just need this command. Okay. And the script, the actual source code itself, is in bin. Okay. This took me a second to figure out, because if you go to lib, there's some like supporting functions that I'm assuming are being imported here. Let me take a look. They're not explicitly being imported there, so I'm sure they're being imported somewhere else. Dune project. So that's hello reason.install opam. Opam is like the OCaml package manager. Here's some stuff for like deploying to Azure. I'm not gonna get into that. se.lock. Just think if there's anything that gives me any clear way that how they connect this util file to this file. Okay, well, whatever, we'll let that go. Okay, So as we can see here, this looks a lot like that console log. That looks a lot like JavaScript. Okay. But if you saw my OCaml videos, this looks a lot like OCaml. We're using this print endline function to print stuff to the screen, and then it's using, oh, okay, I see. So lib is a module, and then inside lib, there's the util module, and then the util file has the hello function. Okay, so that's how that got there. Makes sense. I get it now. Okay. So it's running this hello function, which runs a colored hello. So if I'm in this folder, okay, so I would just type in npm run test, which technically is running this command, sex hello, which means se compile and execute this hello project. Okay. And so we get the colorful hello world. It ran the program. Okay. All fine and good. And I can take this out and just do this like normal. And just pass in the string of cheese. Oops, I didn't spell cheese right. Cheese. And there, see, it logs cheese. Okay. Cool. Now notice we don't see this console log. Okay. So I'm not sure where that console log. Oh, yeah, it's right there. Running test program cheese. Got it. Cool. So that's there. Now for ReScript, so notice the file extension names: res for ReScript, re for reason. Okay, for that you go to the ReScript documentation and you'll clone this ReScript project template. This kind of has a whole setup for you already, and you can just adapt it as you like. And essentially your source code is this demo.res. Okay, and see in this case it's js.log because you're using JavaScript's log function. And see, no semicolons are necessary. I think in Reason they are. So before I switch terminals, let's just test that theory out. I take out the semicolon there. Let's see, does it compile right? No, it still compiles. Let me see if I take out both semicolons. Does it still work? Yep. Okay. So I guess on Reason it doesn't really need the semicolons anymore either. You still need the semicolons. Well, actually, even in OCaml, depending on how you do it, you don't necessarily need the double semicolons. Okay. Cool. But now let me open up a different terminal. I have a different terminal in that folder. So this one's still, that's still hello reason. Don't need an extra one of those. Let's go down another one. Here we go. ReScript project. So here what happens is that you would use the package.json. That's going to use bucklescript. So we can see bucklescript in, oh, that's not BS, that's bsconfig. Package.json BSB, so bucklescript. That is the bucklescript compiler that compiles ReScript code, and it's going to run this command. Okay, so I would just do npm run build. See, that builds the folder, and then the actual compiled JavaScript is right here as demo.bs. So see, it just took that JS log and compiled it to console.log. So then if I do this, node source / demo.bs.js, hello world. Okay, cool. So now we see sort of how I'm going to use these two things. Let's go back in the documentation and take a look at sort of the first language features. So on ReScript, first let's focus on how to create a record. Let's see if there's any difference between ReScript. So a record, essentially what you're doing is like an interface in TypeScript where you're defining the shape of a bunch of key values. Okay, essentially when you're compiling it to JavaScript, you're just basically typing your objects before you create them, similar as you would in TypeScript. Okay, so I'm saying, hey, there's a type called person, and it looks just like a JavaScript object that you're just typing, and that's how that looks there. Let's see how it would look like in Reason. I think it's going to be pretty much the same. Yep, there's just with the semicolon, but as we saw, the semicolons aren't there. So really, for the most part, so far it's looking like ReScript is really just another name for Reason. Okay. Variants are the ways like to create, are more like enums, where you're creating a series of options. Okay, so there's variants there. Let's take a look at a variant in ReScript. Yep, so still looks pretty much the same. Okay, let's take a look at arrays. Okay, that array looks the same. Okay, and the list looks like that. Let's take a look at it in Reason. Actually, let's go to basic structures. I think that's what I'm looking for. List. Okay, an array. So here we're starting to see some differences, because here they basically, the array becomes the primary way to use data, and see it's structured like a normal JavaScript array. While if we go back to Reason, I see 1, 2, 3. We see we have to put these pipes at the beginning and end of the array to signal the creation of the array. Okay, and if we go to the list, where was the list? I think the list was at the top. So when you use a bracket syntax, you're creating something more like a list, which may just be a change of semantics. Okay, then there's maps, which are just like maps in JavaScript. Array. Okay, so let me just compare here for a second. 3. Array usage. Hello world. My array 0. Lists are immutable. Yeah, so I think they just swapped the naming and just called what was a list before an array. Although the syntax is different, because even with a list here, so if I go back to list here, oh, still lists are immutable. So an array is our primary data structure. JavaScript arrays. Okay, so they just basically, you have the JavaScript array there. So that is different. So let me see if I can actually use a JavaScript array. Does let me use the methods though? Okay. First item is 0. So let's test this out. Okay, so here we are in the ReScript side. So what I'm going to do, well, not here. Here, we're going to let my R equal 1, 2, 3. And then let's see if we can actually assign a new spot. So index 3 equals 5. Okay. Because it works like a normal JavaScript array, I should be able to just literally just add another index at will. So let's see if that works. Okay, that seemed to work. And then if I run the file, oh, I get an error. Let's see what it was. Index out of bounds. Okay, let's take a look at the source code. My array 1, 2, 3. Yep. Camo array dot set. Do 3 2 5. Okay, so it's still wanting me to make sure that it is still like a set of data. Like not I have to doesn't automatically create that extra index. Okay. List A, add to the front using the spreading operator, concatenate lists. Oh no, this is a reason. Let's take a look at ReScript. Lists, faster getting, faster prepending, slow at everything else. Okay, and the list is different syntax. So there you, it's kind of more like looks. So you have to write the word list 1, 2, 3. So let's see what happens there. So let me go back to demo BS here, actually demo.res here, and let's assign it as a list. My list equals list 1, 2, 3. And then let's js.log my list. First I gotta build. Then let's run the file. Okay, and cool. So here we printed it out. And see, this looks a little bit different. So see, like it's more of like a linked list dot structure. So let's take a look at the underlying JavaScript. var my list. Okay, got it. Yeah, so they're using like a linked list type structure there, so, which is why it's called a list. And we can see that in the output of the JavaScript, in the way it gets compiled. Okay, cool. So you are just using like a normal array, but they use camel to. Looks like before they were using like this sort of camel structure to kind of limit the array. So you have that. Okay, now let's try to see what happens. Would if I try this in Reason? So if I try this in Reason, if I try that same syntax, will it let me? So if I were to do this, like let list 1, 2, 3, 4. See, it doesn't quite recognize it. And then I do console.log. Oh, I gotta give that list a name. My list. Sorry for the sirens. I live in Brooklyn. Always a lot of sirens all around the place. Console.log my list. Oh, there's something it doesn't like. Camerlin, please install Reason. Well, okay, so let's go back to the other terminal here. Let's run this. Okay, we got a compiler, unclosed, open on line 2, column 17. Failed, reformatter. Now, if I were to create this as a normal list, as we saw in the Reason syntax, which was like this, let's see what we get. Okay. And then if I were to make this an array, like as it was in the Reason documentation, I do that, I get that. Okay. So there is a difference in syntax there. So this is the first time we see like a real sort of like substantial difference in syntax, really with the way with your data structures. Let's just look a little bit more. Records were pretty much the same. Variants were pretty much the same. Functions, let's take a look at functions. Okay, that's pretty straightforward how you write a function. I can't imagine it'd be all that different in ReScript. Okay. That, yeah, it's pretty much the same. It's just a normal standard JavaScript arrow function. And you can have name parameters. And you should be able to have name parameters here too. Yep. Yeah, so that's the same. Was there any other loops? Okay, and again, loops, even in Reason, look like just like a normal JavaScript loop. And let's take a look over here. Control flow. Loops look the same. Yeah, so not too much difference. Let's see here, JSX usage. It's not complete over this. I should pretend ReScript supports JSX into when some different one. This isn't the JSX into the end. I component name GScript. Okay, so it can use, but I'm pretty sure we can use JSX in here too. Slightly different syntax in its use. See, that looked a little bit different than we saw over here. But overall, I would say 90% the same. Okay, so if you learn Reason, you for the most part know ReScript with some minor changes. Now, other interesting question would be if I use Reason syntax in ReScript, will it work? Okay, so in this case, let's try to write an array that looks like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and let's see if that does anything. And that's going to be in a different terminal. Okay, ReScript project template, and that's going to be npm run build. Oh, we got a compiler error. Let's see here, invalid index out of bounds. Oh, that's a different thing. Went too far. Here we go. I'm not sure you want to parse here when looking at. Okay, so it doesn't recognize the old school Reason arrays. So if I go back over here to basic structures, I go over here to arrays. Yeah, so it doesn't seem to recognize that syntax. Okay, and if I were to do Yeah, so basically, if I just take out this pipe, so that'll work. But okay, so they don't necessarily recognize each other's differences, but where they're the same, they're the same. Now, if I were to rename this file, like this is probably configured for ReScript specifically. Name, GitHub source true, bs.js, common.js, world. My curiosity would be, let me try to create another file. New file. Can it still compile reason files? That's going to be my next question. Okay, so let me go back over here, copy this from the reason file, copy it over here. Let's do another npm run build. Although this is still got to be fixed. So I'm just going to move these pipes here. Let's see here. Module flat file console cannot be found. Running test program. bsconfig, bsp. Ladder builds third parties. Did you include the files directory in bsconfig? Okay, let me try running bsb. Okay, so I guess you can't compile a reason with buckle script anymore. It has to be ReScript. Okay, so that's one thing. Okay, so that's interesting. So basically, if you want to really use the buckle script compiler, you got to use ReScript. You have to use sort of those changes. But if you want to use Reason, you can still use Reason to compile to like native code. I don't think that this will compile ReScript code, but for that I'd probably have to kind of get into more of the configurations because this is using the compiler. But I think now you guys kind of get a better idea. So for those of you who've used Reason, now you can kind of see what the differences are. They're not much, but the differences that are there are enforced. So when you're using buckle script and ReScript to do ReScript stuff, you kind of have to use the exact ReScript syntax. When you're using Reason with the SE and Dune compiler, you got to write Reason code. They're basically near identical, but slightly different languages at the end of the day. So my name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Go sign up for the Slack and Discord community over there at devnursery.com. Have a great day and enjoy.